This episode of the show is brought to you from the Salesman.org Hubspot studio. Hello Sales Nation, my name is Will Barrett and I'm the host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most downloaded B2B sales show. On today's episode we have Christian Kinnear. He is the SVP of International Sales over at Hubspot.com. And on today's episode we're getting into the new buyer journey. What's changed, what hasn't, what's coming forward in the not too distant future with the new buyer journey, and a whole lot more on how you can take advantage of this as a B2B sales professional. Everything we talk about, as always, is available in the show notes over at salesman.org. And with that said, let's jump right into it. Christian, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you, Will. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. Okay, so on today's episode, we want to get into the new buyer's journey, and let's just jump straight into it. Christian, post-pandemic, and I'm sure we're all sick and tired of talking about post, mid, pre, post-ish pandemic at this point, but to frame it up, post-pandemic, how has, if at all, the buyer's journey changed when specifically we're talking about complex B2B software or products? How has the buyer's journey changed in that context?
Yeah, definitely has. And it's a great question. I think the experience of how buyers and sellers have interacted has clearly been shaken up fundamentally during the pandemic itself. And I think that the first point is that we know buyers have been sort of taking more control of the selling-buying dynamic over the last number of years. The old model of sellers having most control of the sales process and buyers needing to follow them is no longer the case. I think buyers have taken more control of the process themselves. I think it's been accelerated in the pandemic, frankly, because I think the requirement and need to say we have to engage in some way, we have to still find a way to interact, has forced sellers to offer digital content, ways and means of getting the information they need, finding a way that is self-serve, because buyers haven't been available in the 9-to-5 classic environment that they used to be. So they're saying, look, send me something that I can access when I want, how I want, where I want, because my buying life has been scrambled a little bit in pandemic as well. So I think sellers have adapted well, companies have adapted well to offer content in different formats. But a little bit the genie's out of the bottle now. So the buyer's gone, great. So you're actually able to give me what I want, how I want, where I want. And from now on, it will always be thus. So sellers are like, I used to hold back some of those things, try and get you to engage with me and do things on my terms. And now suddenly, okay, I have to keep giving it to you on your terms. So that's an interesting dynamic and the experience around it. I think a little of what's as part of it is the digital experience in this kind of hybrid CX environment that we now have, where buyers are people too, right? So they have this B2C engagement, this B2C experience, and they know it's beautiful and simple, and B2C has always been the standard bearer of how digital experiences can be beautiful. And they go from that straight on the same laptop in their kitchen, straight into this B2B experience and go, oh, this is a bit jarring. The B2B experience is built for the seller, not the buyer. And they're pushing back saying, this is not going to work anymore. You can't continue with the B2B type experience you were doing, which is solving for your sellers and your salespeople. You got to adjust it to solve for me, the buyer. And that's been interesting and has adapted. And I think the last part is there's been some complexity of buying process. So people are used to, in again, the old pre-pandemic world, the way they bought things and the way decisions were made in companies, there was formal and informal channels. So there was a lot of stuff happened in the meeting room and a bunch happened outside at coffee shop, water cooler, pub afterwards, or whatever that format might be. And a lot of those kind of social organic interactions were gone because people were now scattered to their homes and nobody was in the office. So there's suddenly this uncomfortable nature of we have to make a large complex decisions. Some of the informal dynamics we used to have for sounding each other out and understanding who's where with this decision are gone. I have to try and find a way to engineer a different way of getting to that decision. So there was delays. People were hesitant, saying, oh God, I'm not quite as comfortable as I used to be in this environment per the old. And in there as well, there's elements of, I think, given the digital nature of interaction with buyers and sellers in pandemic, we've seen some of this, and I'll keep an eye, but there's been some sort of team creep, I guess, where you've had more buyers, more sellers, more people involved, because it's very easy to send a link off to somebody and say, hey, why don't you jump on this call too? Mm-hmm. I got extra buyers, extra sellers, extra experts, different people with vested interests jumping in on calls. Difference to a meeting room where there's some formality about being invited physically into a room versus having just add-on people being thrown into meetings kind of last minute which has all served to confuse, I think, the process a little bit. And we've seen certainly folks having a little bit of a wrestle with making those bigger, more complex decisions you're describing in this new environment.
You've told me totally off the questions I'm going to ask, Christian, which is great because it's a slightly different thread here. Whose responsibility is it then to manage this more complex buying process? And I'm sure it will simplify over time as we understand best practices and there's software tools developed to manage some of this. Is it the seller's responsibility to manage all of this, keep everyone on track? Or is it now, because the buyer's taking so much ownership of the selling process, the buying process, is it on the buyer's side to invest more in procurement teams and have more formal buying kind of processes internally? Whose responsibility is this?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of two parts to the answer. I think the temptation is for the salespeople to say, I'm going to engineer a new process that works for me, and I'll look to bring my buyers through that process. I'll try to set guardrails and control it and try and pull them through my process. And that's not going to work. I mean, we can talk about that in a moment as to the makeup of buyers now just won't allow that to happen anymore. So I think part one is you've got to really understand what the buyer wants to do, how they want to buy from you. And that will be different per industry or per engagement type. So for your industry, for your typical buyer, for when you're engaging with, how do they want to buy? And then designing around them. It's a little bit bespoke, but that is the nature of where we're going, that buyers will say, I want to buy a certain way, so understand me and then deliver what I need and how I need it. I think there's going to be, just right now, to maybe the acute point you made, buyers may not exactly know what they want today, right now. And this is part of the challenge. So they'll say, hey, look, honestly, we're in this hybrid world, or we're moving from, for most people, has been a binary situation of everyone used to be in the office. Now everybody used to be at home. And that was still kind of a level playing field because we were all in two different places. The new hybrid we're moving into, where some are in the office and some are not, and some will and won't be there at different times, at different moments. So this is going to be interesting for the buyer to figure out and say, we're not quite sure how to make decisions in the most optimal way, to your point. So why don't you help us and guide us? Because again, if you think of some of the value salespeople bring is, in my world of software and SaaS, buyers might buy SaaS and might buy a software product or a CRM once every number of years. My salespeople are positioning and selling it every day, every week, closing deals all of the time to help people make buying decisions. So we've got expertise to say, look, I'll help you figure out how others have done it. So other companies like you in this hybrid environment, the way that they've approached it is thus, and we'll talk about kind of some best practice of how others have done. So I think salespeople can help consult and inform as buyers navigate. I think over the next number of months, the next year, I think buyers will settle into a new way of buying, a new hybrid way, and they'll figure it out. But for right now, for the next 12 months or 18 months, I think sellers and salespeople can help them navigate that and figure it out themselves.
We both mentioned this word hybrid like 27 times already, like 10 minutes into the conversation, right? And this is where we're at now, of, as you outlined, we were all in the office, then we were all at home, scared, and now we're kind of back and forth, and some companies are allowing more time in the office, less time in the office. We've had one of your colleagues on to talk about some of this from HubSpot's perspective in the past as well, and Apple are having all kinds of shenanigans as a leader in their space of dragging people back to the office as well. So clearly we're not resolved in this situation. But my background is medical device sales. In fact, I do have from another episode, I've got an endoscope here. These are some of the equipment I used to sell. Now, I had to go into a hospital operating room, a operating theatre, hand this to a surgeon, explain how a cable goes on the end of it. I would sell the full camera systems that would go alongside it. Deal sizes of 50 to 100 to 200 grand, depending on whether we're doing the whole operating room or just these scopes, which are like, between 3 and 5 grand a pop themselves. I literally had to be there. So how this worked mid-pandemic, I don't know. There were probably some, especially for like orthopedic implant salespeople, people who have expertise in that space that the surgeons rely on to add value within the operating room itself. I imagine there was exceptions of having people come into, here in the UK, the NHS and that side of things. With software and HubSpot, seemingly from outside looking in, it seems like a opportunity to just have everyone work remotely, everyone at home, have one mega office somewhere in the US or in Dublin and manage the whole of the planet. Is there a benefit for a software product or a product which could be sold completely remotely to having people either on the ground in field sales or even in the physical same location, same country as their customers?
Yeah, so there's a bunch in there as well. I think on the medical devices and software, and so teasing that out a little bit, I think there's clearly, as you touched on, a difference in SaaS and software sales, not being a physical item. You don't physically need to touch and hold the item itself, but the nature of the buyer's requirement is similar. So I want to feel and see how it works. I want to experience it for myself. And you can do that remotely much, much easier with software and SaaS. So there's a whole bunch of great tech today. You've got sandboxes, demo environments, trial instances, a bunch of things that can say, we'll give it to you. You can like physically get hands-on with the product. We'll set it up so it looks and feels exactly how it might do for your industry, for your company, for the business that you're in. And people can experience SaaS and software easier remote. You don't need to physically be there for that experience itself. I think though the thing about software, and maybe to extend your analogy a little bit, not all software and SaaS is built the same is an interesting part. So take your med devices example. If you're a medical devices salesperson, you say, I've got a device I'm going to bring to you and show to you. And you arrive and say, you start to unpack, 10, 15 different parts and say, it's one device, but it comes with 15 different parts, all of which were made in different locations. We'll have different materials, have different shapes and size and gauge and things. But don't worry, I've got a lot of connectors and adapters and things that makes it all connect and fit together. I'm now making one device out of 20 pieces with adapters and connectors. It's all painted the same color with the same badge. So therefore, I'm telling you it's one device. And the doctor's looking at you saying, this clearly isn't a device. This is like a collection of separate things you've kind of cobbled together to create a device that you're proposing. And that might still be okay. It might still function, but
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you in your thread there. I apologize. Do you have a background in medical devices or experience in that space?
I don't know. No, I don't.
You're talking my world of
really?
this.
Okay.
A light cable goes on here. This comes off. That's one adapter. Yeah. There's another one underneath. Yeah. That's another adapter right there. There's a third adapter. I've got a briefcase with me now that still has all kinds of adapters. I've not worked in medical device sales for like 6 years now, and my whole life was these little things.
Okay,
so
back.
Yeah, you're totally on the right tracks of all this, Christian.
Yeah, I got you. No. Maybe it could be a next career. I'll keep that in mind. So like that, and that's a challenge, right? That's hard. And the version of how we would espouse a different version of all this. I'll jump into our product for a second, and you can get me back on track. But the idea of a software product being crafted, not cobbled, is kind of key to us. We built our product in one tech. It's not cobbled of various technologies. It's built for the user, not the buyer. So we position a product that when you use it, it should be consumer type user experience. And we keep talking about experience in this call, which I think is key. The product should be powerful. The way you use it has to be like a consumer type interface. You go, I can intuitively just use that. I don't need a huge explanation of it. So notwithstanding that, the question about physically being somewhere, and you're asking about the hybrid or remote nature of the future, I think folks won't all be remote in the future. I think they will be hybrid. I think it's here already. Is there a value in somebody physically being present? I think there's value in different ways and means. So we've got, I think, value in cultural nuance and understanding. So if I'm from the same country, it's well proven and well understood that people in the UK buy in a different way to people in Japan, different folks in the US, and so on and so forth. And there's just different ways of engaging. There's different ways of picking up nuance of buying behaviors, how people like to negotiate, how they like to do a deal is different in different cultures. And I think there's micro versions of that even within countries. I think of Ireland, people in Dublin engage differently with folks down the country, in the west of Ireland, the south of Ireland. I think it's true in the UK as well. So I think having that local nuance and understanding is important. I do think, though, we touched a minute ago about kind of the physical nature of complex deals. We definitely see this coming. I think there's a bunch of research we did with our user base, and I think 72% of them said they're going to invest heavier now in face-to-face interaction in the coming year. Some of that is bounce back. I think people are saying we're going to get back into a more physical nature of our deals. But I think where it really lends itself to, and this is a little bit of our announcement of moving into the UK, as I'm sure you know, is we're looking to have those complex deals where the stakes are quite high in a complex deal. And if it's a bigger deal where if it works, it could really transform your business. If it doesn't, it could be kind of quite detrimental to your business. The decision-making stakes being so high, I think the physical cues you get the rapport you can build, the trust you can build in physical interaction matters a ton in those environments. If it's a lower key transactional thing, you can probably, you're not too concerned about doing it through some digital only. But I do think there's a role for that physical presence piece. But we're also going to, and I'm going to use the H word again to some degree, because the thing we've got to keep in mind is buyers, we talk about being physically present, buyers won't be physically present as much anymore either. So, the old idea that the salesperson can go to the office and gather together all the important people into one room, that's not going to actually be the case, because don't forget, buyers want to be remote and hybrid as well. So I think all the environments we have for any complex deal with multiple buyers and multiple decision makers, you're going to have a proportion of them aren't physically in the room and never will be. You're not going to be able to be in the room with them as a salesperson. So it's the stands are shifting a little here. We're having to adapt quite a lot.
I'll tee this. I'll ask a question and I'll tee it up, and I'll give it to you, Christian, for a response. How much are salespeople going to become more important as a differentiator between different products and services moving forward? And what I mean by that is we sell a sales training product to individuals and to corporate accounts over at salesman.org, our Salome Simple Academy product. And I find that individuals will just jump on, watch one of our webinars or a video or a live chat that I do kind of weekly on the YouTube channel. And then they'll go, okay, I trust this dude. Or usually they've been listening to the podcast for 3 years and they go, oh, I like everything he does. If the training content is a few steps further or more organized than the podcasts and the videos, then it's worth it. It's going to be great. The corporate side of things, I find, is completely different. And it might be the same individual who's a sales manager who buys it from themselves and then buys it for the team later on, who comes over to the corporate buying journey. But what we do is try to emulate the essence of what you're describing there of a SaaS product at Hubspot. I'll just give them a 48-hour demo. They get access to everything. Hey, jump in. If you like it, you can sign up. If you don't like it, I'd love some feedback if there's anything you think we can improve. 100% of the time, though, they want to jump on a call. And I've got nothing to tell them. They've seen the product. They know exactly what they're getting. But they want to jump on a call just to either chat with me as and I say this hesitantly, but like the tiniest celebrity in a tiny niche of a space, right? Again, maybe they've been listening to the podcast. They want to have a chat with me. That's fine. A lot of the times we'll chat for nothing to do with the product, and then they'll go, okay, just send over the invoice and we'll get rocking and rolling. So where I'm going with this then, Christian, is in a world where, and I'm not being derogatory towards HubSpot as a product here. I use it. It's a great product, partner of the show, all that good stuff. But there are lots of CRMs. Technology is becoming easier to produce if we're going down this specific example. There's going to be a lot more competition. Products are going to have similar features and benefits. The answer might be no to this, which is fine. But are we potentially moving to a place where salespeople could be the differentiator between, hey, I signed up for a demo of HubSpot, salesperson was super knowledgeable, they helped me through the buying journey, and I signed up for X competitor, and they just left me in the lurch, and they were cold calling me every 3 seconds, I'm going to go with HubSpot. Are salespeople potentially going to be a differentiator for products and services moving forward?
Yes, and partly, I guess. So I think what the real success going forward for sellers is going to be understanding, given we talk about this hybrid working environment, this hybrid CX that we're now in, it's already arrived, and some people are still kind of wrestling, trying to get back into the old way before pandemic, but this hybrid CX is here, where there's about 50 to 60% of your selling process that the salesperson doesn't own anymore. So it's owned by your web team and your marketing team. So the buyer we've been describing will say, I will go and research, I'll go and do my own reviews, I'll go and find all the information I need for the first half of my buying process. I won't speak to you until I've completed that. So you won't even know I'm doing it probably. And I won't just take information from you and your website. I'm going to go to for social proof from customers, partners of yours, and so on, and understand what it's like to engage with you and your company, what your product or service is like. So all that stuff will happen. And only when they've kind of cleared the gates of those parts, saying, yeah, so far so good. You guys check out, and I'm happy that my research tells me you're potentially a solution to my challenge, my problem. Then I engage with the salesperson. So like all things, having an amazing digital experience up front and then a terrible salesperson will not result in success. Having an amazing salesperson who never gets to speak to you because your pre-digital experience is terrible is obviously not going to succeed either. So both need to be true. And I think the way that we have to start thinking is that there's this end-to-end experience where the entire experience has to flow. There can't be this jarring thing. And too often, I think in the past, we've had this sense of, well, you guys on the website, go and do whatever. Like, that's your job, and build whatever you think you want to build, and say whatever you want to say on the website. And then marketing, that's yours, and I'll do my thing. And we should all just stay in our silos and do our own thing and stay in lane. It's not going to work anymore, because the buyer is saying, I'm getting this kind of jarring experience of jumping from A to B to C. There's nothing joined up. This is like a frictional experience. It's pretty awful, and it's inconsistent, and there's loads of reasons why this doesn't feel like an enjoyable way of engaging. So you guys got to get together and figure that out. And I think salespeople have a huge role. The short answer is we all want amazing salespeople. That's the goal of every sales organization. But I think your role is not just to take leads and turn them into deals and close them. It's going to be to help inform your web team and your marketing team about what's working, what's not earlier in the cycle. And a little of this balance is going to be the one where, web teams and marketing, I think, had solved for their salespeople predominantly. The idea of a website was just try and find a way to get someone to come to our site, and then as quickly as you can, force them to give us their contact information, and then give it to me, and I'll take it from there. And that's a B2B site designed for a salesperson to solve for lead flow for salespeople. And again, back in the early days, that was seen as a pretty good structure. It was a good design where sales and marketing would say, great, you're feeding me leads to go and get my job done. But we're back to square one. Like, buyers are going to go, that's not going to work for me anymore, where you're making me kind of contort through a process and through an experience that is just unpleasant and not one I want to follow just to solve for your sales rep. It's not going to work. So I think the people component of this stuff, especially in complex deals, we're back to, when the stakes are high and you need to trust truly the person, that they can do what they will say they will do, that the rapport is there, that the expertise of the individual and the way they treat you, that is always going to be one of the most important components. But I think what we've seen as an evolution is the bit before that, the how we kind of get the contact or the lead to the salesperson was seen as not really very important, just a matter of mechanically get me names of people that I can go and engage and I'll do the lion's share. I think that's changed quite a lot, and some folks are still holding on to the old world of, can we go back to how it was? And I think by and large the answer is no, we can't.
So, Christian, for a B2B salesperson listening to this right now, maybe they're selling SaaS, maybe they're selling medical devices, whatever they're selling. What do they need to do? You mentioned rapport, expertise. What do they need to do right now to make their career easier, more successful 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think there's probably things that you can do now that will actually benefit you now more presently, which is always the salespeople's prerogative. Kind of want to know how they can improve quickly, get better results, but also for the long run. I think this idea of changing your perspective and saying, if you are obsessing about your sales process and how you're selling, I think you're doing it wrong. I think you've got to flip. And this piece we talked at the start of the call, that the way the buyers buy has already changed, and it will continue to change. It's going to be in flux for the next year to 2 years of figuring out what the new buying process is for your particular persona, the buyer who you engage with in your industry, depending on what it is. I think continuously refining that, being a mystery shopper, understanding how this feels from a buyer's perspective and refining that is going to be really important. I think the piece that salespeople also are waking up to, but maybe just to call it out, is the most important way of generating future business, if you're thinking about kind of the longevity of your career and in your role, is the advocacy and evangelism of your customers. That buyers no longer look to a vendor and a salesperson to be the point of trust. They don't say, hey, can you tell me if you're a good company or not, if your service is good or not? They just don't trust. And that's not, again, an industry specific thing. Buyers don't trust sellers and vendors anymore. They say, I'll just go and ask and understand from customers and from reviews. So if you can focus as a salesperson on every customer that you bring through, whatever the experience is, you delight them to a point where you think that person is going to be an advocate in market, an evangelist for the products, for what we do. You're just going to get this flywheel effect of positive advocacy in market generates higher brand, brings back more business, and this flywheel starts to really spin. I think the last part, and this is maybe somewhat tactical, but it is something I've seen quite a bit at the moment. There's in this world where people are at home and will continue to have this kind of mix between home and hybrid, and certainly when you're engaging digitally, it's kind of the performance aspect of what we're doing right now. So you're on a screen, you're in this box, and there's a degree of performance in how you engage with people through the limitations of this Zoom, Skype, Teams, whatever the tool you're using. And I think folks and salespeople aren't as conscious around the neuroscience of how we need to be conscious of what we're doing in this environment. Because again, the physical thing where you used to go meet somebody, you could use a bunch of different levers and behavioral ticks to engage with somebody and build trust and build connection. In this box, you're a little limited. And I think of the kind of neuroscience around the kind of reptilian brain saying, am I seeing inside this box the things I expected to see? Does the person in the background environment check out? Does it look and feel as I expect it to? If I'm going to make a very big investment with this individual and all I have is this, 12 by 9 frame, whatever it is, do I trust the individual based off this limited scope? And I think we see a lot of folks who are engaging in ways on Zoom where a little bit too casual, not too conscious what's in background, not too conscious of how they're presenting. And it's just something to be aware of, because we are hardwired as buyers to say, this doesn't look right, this doesn't feel right, and I can't engage kind of my limbic and neocortex, kind of my emotive and rational sides to process the business transaction, because I'm unsteady, unsure that what I'm seeing is what I need. So it's a little tactical, but it's actually it's becoming increasingly important as folks start salespeople trying to engage in a way that they haven't maybe before, especially for industries where they're shifting from being mostly or entirely field sales into this inside sales, kind of digital and field, and just focusing on that digital part. It's really important. Don't neglect it, is probably the advice.
Christian, is it me or is it crazy that people are doing $50, $100, $1 million deals and they're on some crappy laptop that the laptop's pointed up the nose? They're in a, that's super. I dress casual on the podcast, but if I was on a big business meeting, I'd have at least a blazer and a tie on, kind of thing. Is it crazy that a year ago, everything's up in the air? Who knows what's going on with the world? The world might be ended. But right now, it's insane that people aren't investing into, or companies aren't investing perhaps even more so into their team, and that little bit of a $50 webcam, a light if we need it. You've got for people watching this on YouTube, you've got nice lateral light. I assume it's coming from a window to one side of you. You look great on camera there. Very photogenic, sir. Is it crazy that salespeople aren't focusing on what is such a simple, quick and easy and cheap fix? That, again, if you're interviewing, essentially a buyer's interviewing multiple companies, the dark, dingy salesperson locked in the cupboard, they're never going to win the business.
Yeah, and I think there's a degree of understanding. Right, we were in survival mode initially, and folks said, "Look, whatever you have, just use it. Find a corner, find a laptop, and whatever it's fine. It's okay." We're all kind of understanding, but we are moving into this next phase of it's going to become more required. And I think there are some of those cases you described where incredible deals are being done in what looks like pretty dingy circumstance. There's a vast majority of others where people have been qualified out saying, I thought that company was a legitimate company that would probably be suitable for our needs, but my goodness, I spoke to someone, they rolled out of bed and sat in front of the camera, and you know what, if they can't even get themselves dressed and cleaned up and they're sitting at their kitchen table having their breakfast, like, I'm sorry, this is not a professional company. And that stuff really, really matters. It's really important. And again, I understand a lot of folks, I've a little bit been in this world for 20 years of digital sales and working through an inside digital sales. I get there's a bunch of folks are adapting and figuring out, how do I do this? But you got to put some time and thought and effort into it. And there's a ton of stuff out there. There's tons of research, tons of information to give you a guide on it. But simple fixes just to engender that trust, and the things that you are important when you physically go to a building. This stuff is really important too, and getting it right is the difference in winning and losing. So I would put some time into it. Yeah.
Right. 2 final questions. One, you might want to take off your HubSpot hat for a second for this. HubSpot PR are freaking out as we say this right now. when we talk about this flywheel effect, if you put yourself in the position of a salesperson, they're loyal to the company. HubSpot by clearly treating their employees right, all that good stuff. But we've got to be somewhat selfish. It's our career, right? So we're trying to build this flywheel effect of serve the customers really well. They love us. They become advocates for us personally and the product that we're selling. Is there anything practically that salespeople should be doing, like going out of their way and like off the record from the company they work on, asking for a review, testimonial, feedback on the LinkedIn page? Again, I'm not asking you what HubSpot do internally, but for you personally in a sales role, is there anything that you would be doing to drive that ability to have trust at scale, whether it's your LinkedIn profile having lots of recommendations or you're having a tiny little one-page website with lots of like little video reviews from people that you worked with? Is there anything practically that you'd do on that front?
Yeah, look, I think there's the standard approach that works quite well generally is kind of that lighthouse concept for a company. So depending on your maturity in the industry, if you're a disruptor or you're well established, having those marquee names and logos and making a conscious decision as a business to say, we will look to acquire the top 2 or 3 logos in industry X because we think that can be meaningful. That's an industry of interest. We may decide to offer really preferential pricing to those companies to get them on our books, with the understanding that we can use their name and logo in some of our materials. And just that lighthouse effect in that industry clearly has a massive impact. People will look to the leaders in the industry to say, well, if they trust company X, whoever we are, then the company must be really good because they are the industry leader and they make good decisions. So I think that's an obvious one, is just using that lighthouse impact effect of targeting those and deciding commercially to offer a really good deal to win the logo and use it in your media materials.
Should individual salespeople be doing the same thing though? Should the email signature of Barry at whatever company have 2 or 3 videos from, hey, I worked with Barry, he really helped me with this, and this. So when you do send a cold email, the buyer goes, oh, this individual we can trust. It's worth getting on a phone call and a consultant call, however we want to frame it. And then we can continue the conversation from there. Obviously, it's a great idea for businesses. But should individuals be building their own little bit of IP and trust from that perspective as well?
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in it. And again, I think there's it's going to be combined with the two. So if buyers and customers will give you a testimonial about you and the experience with you, fantastic, 100%. And all of this is just instilling some degree of confidence in the individual. That the buyer, again, we all do this. It's about the salesperson and the company. It's a bit of both. So I want to know both are trustworthy, both are dependable, reliable. Will do what they say they will do. So I think doing both is important. Again, it's not an either or, but yeah, I think there is. And some of the things I talk about LinkedIn profiles, testimonials and references in there are good. Having them searchable and available on your website. I mean, again, people are much more interested now. We think about the majority of buyers now being millennials. There's talk of 70 to 80% of buying decision-making groups have a millennial or more in them, and 30% are lead buyers. So millennials want self-service. They want to get access to things, want to go and do it in their own time. Too often, again, we've had this idea of, well, if you want to find out about me as a salesperson or my clients, like that's all gated and you only get access if you give me your contact information. We have to get away from there. So the Barry, the salesperson we just mentioned, that stuff should be available on the website, easily accessible for everybody to see. Here's our team. You want to see testimonials about our team. I want to see feedback about them. Click here and see. There's all the information you want is available. So I think, yeah, gathering those and sharing those through your own personal, be it on your email and your LinkedIn profile and through your company website, it's all the right stuff. It's all the same things, just engendering that sense of trust and transparency that people can say, yeah, if I want to know about you, I can find out about you. It's available. So 100%.
I've got one final question after this. I never thought to pitch this question from this perspective. From as a SVP, managing director, a senior executive in a public company, you may not be hiring. Oh, I'm sure you're not hiring individual salespeople, right? You're not involved in that process anymore. But if you were in that process, or you're hiring other people within the organization of leadership management, does a personal brand, does having those third-party verification of trust, whether it be testimonials or videos, does that affect your hiring decisions? Is the value both externally to customers and then perhaps internally as well?
I think to To a degree, but not massively, is my honest answer. Because I think it's hard to know I think in a sales hiring process. Not that long ago, I was hiring salespeople, and I still hire sales managers directly myself. I think it's just that sense of your track record and understanding what it is you've actually done, and that example-based piece of tell me the things you've done that are similar to what I'm looking for, and let me compare the two. I think having references and testimonials still play a role. We do that still, and I think all companies do. I haven't actually seen, it's a really interesting question. I'm going to have to take away of whether we're seeing any increase in salespeople saying, here's a reference from a customer of mine, rather than it's always been an ex-manager of mine, someone I reported into, or a colleague. So I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting angle. You've provoked a thought, which is great. That's what your podcast does. It sparks thoughts, but I don't think it's weighted in the process today. But it's a really interesting addition, given what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, sure. I didn't know the answer to that as opposed to you, because clearly you want a salesperson who drives revenue, not someone who people just like. But then when you get in testimonials from previous sales managers, they probably don't want to get sued either from giving a bad testimonial review or whatever we're calling it. Right. So that was really valuable. I appreciate that, Christian. I've got one final question, something that I ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what's one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Good, better at selling. I think the thing that I've learned later in my career, and I would have loved to have learned it earlier, is this concept of kind of jungle gym development, and that's an American phrase. I think most folks probably get it. So in the playground, it's climbing frame thing in a playground where there's like swings and ropes and ladders and things off it. And I asked this question to somebody not so long ago about growth and development, and they said, do this because the idea is you do a bunch of stuff that is not your job. You do stuff that isn't in your role, isn't in your function, maybe not even in your company. Get exposed to stuff that is unnatural and not part of what you might think is your classic career path ahead of you. Do it and have fun, because the jungle gym idea is it should be enjoyable. You should get some good fun out of it. And the kicker is that you do stuff that doesn't make sense. So I'm now working with some product folks, or I'm in the marketing org, I'm doing things in customer service success. Because what happens is the industry keeps on moving, right? The tectonic plates of our jobs and roles continually shift, and they will probably even at a faster pace going forward. So there will be this change where it says the future great salesperson needs to have the things you had plus a bunch of other DNA of other things. And you go, oh crap, I should start to learn those things. Or if I took this jungle gym approach of getting exposed to those things much more often, and for no direct, logical, career-driven reason, but just exposure. And it's kind of worked for me accidentally sometimes in my career, where people say, hey, you know, you were involved in X and Y projects, you were in that other department, and actually we're looking for someone who has the mix of those things. Congratulations, you're the person for this next role. And that's been a little fortuitous, but somewhat by design in latter years. So I think for salespeople, if you think in those terms of I have a linear path to my career, I would challenge that, because those paths just keep getting scrambled all the time. We've seen it a lot already, and more so with the pandemic. But I'd say the idea of go out and try new things and do stuff that maybe doesn't make perfect sense in a linear career progression. Have fun with it, enjoy it. It's great to get exposed, and then you'll find that when that new role, which is an unusual new venture for the business, you'll be the one approached. You'll be the one who's accidentally in the right place at the right time, but a little bit by design.
Amazing stuff. Well, with that, Christian, we'll wrap up there, mate. Tell us where we can find out more about you. If you want to share your LinkedIn page, if you want people to connect with you on there, and then give us a pitch for HubSpot, or share anything that's going on over at HubSpot as well, if you like.
Yeah, great. So I'd love to hear from folks. I'm on LinkedIn. C Kinnear is my short title, my short handle on LinkedIn. You'll find me Christian Kinnear. I don't think there's too many on there with my name, but you'll find me there. I'd love to hear from you. Beyond that, the big news from a UK point of view is we've announced from October 1st we're hiring in the UK. We'd opened a new entity, and a new office is opening at the moment. So we're hiring 70 people in our UK business for all across the UK. Same as we said earlier on, we fully believe in the hybrid model. So from home, hybrid or office, over the next couple of months, we'll be hiring people. So if you're interested, get in touch on our careers page on hubspot.com. You'll find all the available roles there. Beyond that, it's a busy time. We're heading into our end of year. So Inbound is coming up. It's fully digital this year. It used to be our physical event. And given what's happened, we're keeping it as an event with digitized predominance. So it's going to be a digital event this year. If you're interested in all things HubSpot product-wise, new announcements and exciting news, that's all coming up. I can't give you a reveal today, Will, unfortunately, but we've got to wait for that to come around in the next few days.
Amazing stuff. Well, I'll link to all of that in the show notes to this episode over at salesman.org. And with that, Christian, I thank you for joining us on the show, being so candid, mate. I appreciate that. And for giving us your tips and advice on the new buying journey.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Will.